Hey Boxers, this is Zack with Buildbox. This is part 4 in the How to Build Your Own Video Game series, so let's jump back into it. Okay, cool. So now we've got this character who is going along the path. It's got a jump limit and it's got a jump spin. It's got an angular velocity thrown in there. So we've got a good starting point. But all we've got right now is some ground and some main characters. So let's go ahead and I'm going to add in some spikes as well. So I'm going to go over to my asset library and I'm going to add in a cone. Before I showed you double clicking on the cone puts it in the objects menu. Now I'm going to show you clicking on the add to library also does the same thing. Same exact thing. So use whatever you want. So I'm going to go ahead and click out of my asset library now, and I'm going to call this a cone enemy. Perfect. And apparently I do not know how to type. All right, so let's go ahead and change the collision group now to enemy, and I'm going to put all of my enemies in my game, I'm going to put them under the collision group enemy, and you'll see why in a little bit. It's just much easier, much more efficient. Now I've got this cone enemy, and let's go ahead, let's bring it into our scene. Let's get a good idea of the size we want, because I think that's just, it's too big. You could always do this thing where you kind of just implant it into the ground, and you can have something, blocking the sides so that people can't actually see that you've got it stuck in the ground, or you can just, scale it so that it's a little bit more of the appropriate size. So I'm going to use my scale tool, and I'm just going to, scale it down to something like this. Probably that's enough. Let's do 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. So it's a nice round number. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to just kind of plant it right into the ground. Okay, cool. I like it. Now, one thing I definitely want to do, oops, I accidentally clicked into the cone enemies node map. What I want to do is just select the cone enemy, and I want to give it a little bit of a different color. So I like black usually for these, these enemies. Usually black is a good color for what you want your enemies to be, but you can totally change your color palette to be whatever. You can have it be white. All of your white objects are the enemies. You can do that as well. So whatever color you want your enemies, you just make it that color. Okay, perfect. Now, the other thing I might do is I might extend the end of my scene outwards a little bit, because this scene's awfully short. It's pretty small. So I'm going to just, grab the move tool, and I'm going to extend the end of my scene outwards. Now, the other thing, and this is a really cool thing I wanted to show you. So before, in an earlier beta of the software, you would have to center this ground, and then you would have to scale it out like this, because it would scale out on both sides. Okay, but that's not the case anymore. It's actually, we got this really, really great new tool that allows you to manipulate each side specifically and individually. So for instance, if I want to move this and extend it out here to the left, I can just grab this one and just pull it out and yank it over here. Okay, and it's not going to scale both directions, which is really convenient. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to extend it out over here to the right. Okay, now that looks good. Now one thing I might do is I might take my light, my sun, I might move it upwards just a little bit so that it gets a little bit more sun. Okay, perfect. And you can also change the rotation of the shading and the shadows. I would experiment with that, taking the sun, the light sun, and changing the rotation and the look of where the shadows, where the light is hitting your objects. Okay, so now we've got that, and we've got this awesome cone enemy. Let's go ahead and let's take our cone enemy, and I'm going to look downwards at it. I'm going to see if this works. I'm going to hit D on my keyboard, and I'm going to make a duplicate. And you know what? Actually, I'm not crazy about that, because I want it to go in this direction. So let's go ahead and hit S. That's all right. I think it would be better if I did Y. Yeah, or I'm sorry, W. So I'm going to hit Control Z twice and just go back. And so if you hit W, A, S, or D on your keyboard when you're within a scene, it's going to create copies for you. So I'm going to just create a couple copies right there. I just did. I hit W twice on my keyboard and created a couple copies. And I'm going to go ahead and group them together a little bit better, a little bit closer. All right, now I'm going to click into my cone enemies node map here, and I'm going to give the cone enemy some physics, because right now it doesn't have any physics, so it's not going to collide with the character, and I do want it to collide. But I'm going to make sure that these cones aren't falling through the ground, because I don't want gravity affecting them. And if I hit the preview window, you might be able to see that. You might be able to see the cones falling downwards. Oh, right now we have them set to dynamic, so they actually fell on the ground and they stayed there. Okay, but you can see we're just like building up cones here. They're not really enemies yet. So I'm gonna exit out of preview. Okay, now let's go ahead and make these cone enemies static as well, because I don't want them actually moving around. You can see that the character was pushing them down the path and it was collecting kind of a string of cone enemies, and that's not what we want. So let's go ahead and make it static. Let's go ahead and make it so that when the character collides with these enemies, it's going to defeat the character. And we'll go ahead and we'll add in an event observer for that as well, and it'll be real nice. It'll be dandy. Okay, so I'm going to hook up this if collide node, and I'm going to say that if you collide with any enemies, and I'm going to choose the collision group enemy, and just so you know, the ones here at the top, these are the collision groups. Over down here at the bottom, these are individual objects. So that we have an individual object ground, we have a separate object cone enemy that you've seen before, but if you want to choose the collision groups, then you want to select them up here at the top. Okay, so now that if in this little thing I'm about to show you right now, it's probably really useful to pay attention to this, because this is something that you're going to see in a lot of your games. This is kind of like a standard move here. If you collide with an enemy, you want it to defeat your character. Okay, so we're going to defeat the character, and once it defeats the character, you might probably want an event observer happening here. And so I'm not going to hook up the event observer yet to the game over event observer, because I haven't created one. I don't even have a UI set up for this 3D world yet. So I don't want to hook it up, because if I hook it up to a game over event observer and there's nothing there, it's going to wig out my game and my game's going to hate me. I'm going to go ahead and just hit Command S right now to save. So the next thing, so I wanted to delete the character. I also want to add in a couple more things to this game. So what I'm going to do is I have another main character that I created, and I'm going to drag it in. I'm going to drag in my BB asset here, and I'm going to use a couple things from that BB asset so that I can just copy them over and paste them. So let's go ahead. Let's see if I've got this set up right. I think it's this one. I think it's my jump limit character. Okay, perfect. All right, yeah, this is really what I wanted to do. So this is from another game that I made. I'm going to delete this real fast, but I want to take this explosion node. This is a really cool node that I found on the forum. This is a great node to borrow, and you can get lots of nodes like this off the Buildbox forum. I highly recommend going on there as well, and taking some people's ideas and building off of them. Checking it, like, you really look at this code, and it's really nice to just go through it and understand it. And once you understand how this code works, you can just do more and more and more. But then again, if you don't want to code, if coding is not your thing, if you're not a programmer, then you do not need to do it. You do not need to code. Buildbox does not require you to code at all. It's just something that's fun. If you're a programmer, if you're a coder, then it might be your thing. I'm gonna hit Command C. I'm gonna select my node, hit Command C, and I'm gonna try and paste it into my main character. Okay, perfect. There we go. What this is going to do is it's going to, once the character is defeated, it's going to use the asset name debris, which I haven't created yet, and it's going to create a little explosion. Okay, and so let's go ahead and let's create some debris so this explosion can happen. So I'm going to go back to my 3D world. I'm going to go to my asset library, and since my character is a cube, I'm going to let the debris also be cubes. So I'm going to double click on my cube here, and then I'm going to name this debris. Okay, awesome. So let's go ahead and let's give the debris some physics, and let's give it dynamics so that when the explosion happens, that the objects come downwards as well. It's going to look way more realistic if I make the physics type and the object type dynamic. Okay, so let's go ahead now. I'm going to exit out of my character here. I'm going to go back to my 3D world, and I don't think I need my character anymore for anything. One thing I might, there is one more thing I wanted a trail. I'm going to copy the trail node. I'm going to go into my main character, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to just hook it up right now. So let's go hook it up to the trail. Okay, it looks good there. And I'm going to exit out of my main character, and let's go ahead. I'm going to hit Command S on my keyboard just to save, just because I've made a lot of changes. And let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Sweet, got a character spinning. The gravity's not high enough. And then the trail looks good, but it's too large. You see how it's poking out the side? Oh, that explosion looks really nice. Okay, awesome. So it's coming along nicely. We just have a few more things that we need to do, and we'll go ahead and finish it up in the next 2 videos. So keep an eye out for part 5.